Welcome to the Marvel Cinematic University podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Canton III, and we are continuing our coverage of the Disney Plus animated series, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, episodes 3, 4, and 5 for this edition of the show. Patreon.com/MCUniversityPod, you could get our bonus content, such as subscriber mailbag, such as John Wick 3, such as the little blurb about my whole conspiracy on the Dallas Mavericks Luka Doncic trade with the ownership and that whole 9 yards. Me and Jake did 10 minutes on that if you're so inclined to pay $3 for that, plus every other back catalog episode we have, the Discord, all of those things. And if you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, the whole 9 yards. With that being said, let me introduce the super producer, Jake Christie. Jake, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Not too bad. Not too bad. Excited to talk about this show. It's really good. And with that being said, let me introduce our guest returning for another episode here, Hunter Radesi. Hunter, how you doing, sir?
I'm great. I'm also really excited to be back talking about this show. After the last episode, I was kind of secretly hoping I would get to come talk about it more. So this is thrilling for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have to say, when you find out the way that they drop these, and they drop these in bunches every week, I think it's really good in terms of, especially the 3-episode drop in particular this week. Felt like you got more of a feel for all of the characters involved. I think I can expand upon the point I was making last week as how this feels so much like a comic book that's actually a show, but it's a comic book at the same time. So that really is something I enjoy so much. And then on top of that, I think the way that they present the characters, I even love the way that they end these episodes, where it doesn't necessarily have to be a Spider-Man ending. We get to Lonnie, and the way that they've presented that story has fascinated me so much. And there's like 5 million things we could get to. So, Hunter, I will start with you and just ask you this question. What was your biggest takeaway from these 3 episodes?
Oh boy. Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway. Well, look, I said it at the end of the last episode that the thing I was looking forward to most in like the coming season, was to see like how they would portray the progress of Peter Parker, as a superhero. And I think, as you were just saying, one of the nice things about like a 3-episode drop is I don't have to wait. Like, I got a pretty good idea of what they're doing with that. And not only did I get a pretty good idea of what they're doing with Peter Parker's evolution as a superhero, sort of like you were just saying, we got a really good idea of what they're doing with a lot of these characters' evolutions, in particular, Lonnie Lincoln. And I think that that was really interesting, to kind of see that progression and to see that like he starts to become, I mean, he gets the name at the end of the episode, Tombstone, in this like sacrificial, like, I'm sacrificing my future to save my younger brother, and then
Sorry, I have to say, I did this last week. Every time we say Tombstone, I pull out my Blu-ray copy of Tombstone. I only because, and this is because I'm such a dork, and I'll stop talking, that I organize my Blu-rays by director name, and the director begins with a C, so it's on top.
Here's the thing. I hope you never. I will laugh every single time.
Okay, sorry. Keep going.
No, yeah, but just to the point of like, I think it's very interesting the way they've chosen to develop these characters, and at the end of every episode, I find myself kind of floored by how much I'm enjoying it and how impactful it is. We talked a lot last week about how this show obviously is geared towards kids, but it's playing with like a lot of really big ideas and themes with these characters. And then like they'll like you almost forget that the characters are supposed to be 15, and then they'll drop a random line where they're like, I know Harry's only 15, and I'm like, Harry's only 15? That's crazy. He's this like big social media influencer.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Lonnie, Peter Parker, I've been really impressed with the way they've taken these characters and kind of moved them forward to make them more and more like their comic counterparts, but in ways that are like really new and inventive and, like I said, impactful. I think it's really, really cool.
Yeah, putting them at opposite ends of the spectrum in that way has been really fun to watch, because you get to see the parallels of Peter learning how to be a superhero, Lonnie struggling, getting himself in a situation where he has to do something in his own altruism to save his brother, his love for his brother, But then what ends up happening after initially wanting to still stay on that good side, the stuff with the coach and
Mhm.
playing football and all those things, being honest with his girlfriend, all of these things, trying to figure that out. But then by the end of this fifth episode, he gets a little taste of what it's like to
Mhm.
um be like what you call it, welcomed into another different side of his community, which is something that it seems like maybe there's a little bit of a struggle there, but through that fight he got a taste of that power, and we'll see where that goes. But that storyline is just so fun to me. Jake, how about you? What was the biggest thing you took away from these three episodes?
I just really like that because it's television and there's time to breathe. They're all the characters are pretty sympathetic in their own way. Even like the smaller ones, like they're giving them moments. Like in the fifth episode, with the group of criminals, like they give them moments to be sympathetic and to
Yeah.
be fully realized. And I think with characters like Norman and with Harry and with Lincoln, the characters that like we know canonically do turn bad. I think that a luxury you have in television is that you can be with them being good for longer. Like I think that the original Spider-Man movies do a pretty good job at it with with Norman and with Otto Octavian, um, of
Octavius, you mean?
Octavius. Sorry, I
Yes.
sorry, Otto Octavius.
Okay.
They they do a pretty good job of like humanizing them, but there's a way that like allowing these characters to have a long-term relationship with Spider-Man or with Peter, I think really just it amps up the tragedy of of what's coming. And I really like that we're spending so much time with Lincoln because his descent into being evil could easily be yada yada so quickly, right? Like you could imagine a version of this like in a movie that is like more hastily done, where it's like he replaces his brother in the gang, cut to he's already a bad guy. You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
really, I think that the fact that we're with him and in almost all of these moments we can understand the decisions he's making. Like that is kind of people talk so much about they want supervillains to be like maybe they have a point, yada yada. Like that's not that interesting to me. What's interesting to me is where you can like in each individual micro decision you can understand where they're coming from, and it adds up to the total of like, oh, he became a super like he. I understood why he did that. I understood why he felt like he had to do that. I understood, but then when you add all the decisions up, you end up being Tombstone.
Yeah, and I think you not only got that with him, I think with Norman, you could see the mentor stuff is really this play on it is
Mhm.
really interesting to watch. I think one of the things that I was kind of like gravitating to as it was happening was each trial with the suit, each different suit. It's clear Peter is not comfortable with any of these suits. And Norman's like, I gotta push it, I gotta push it, I gotta push it. But then we get to a point where Norman kind of drops the veil and talks about the Sokovia Accords. I
Mhm.
appreciate that they brought that back into the fold with this. And they're listing the reasoning why superheroes in this instance, he wants to see a different type of superhero as opposed to the ones with the Avengers to this point as they are. And the way that he feels like the need to control the situation and structure Peter, and initially it seems like it's altruistic, but all of these like, well, I got to go to this meeting, I got to do this other thing, there's some tech that might be mine
Yeah.
that Peter runs into at some point. We're getting kind of the layers that we know that Norman's a bad dude, but also at the same time the building of the kind of relationship that he and Peter have, and kind of the different relationship that he has with his own son, which could potentially create a rift between the three of them in their own way. That's a
Classic
Yeah.
Spider-Man.
great. It's really
I,
really good.
I think that I thought was
Classic
really interesting
Spider-Man.
too is how he brings up how like he feels an obligation to help given his wealth. I think that is factors so much into it of like why he's so controlling. Like it's clearly like some type of he's trying to fill some type of like is it guilt? Is it like a response? It's a complicated emotion he's feeling, and it's not as simple. Like clearly he is invested in like the image and how it's testing because it's important to him that this like that it looks good and he can't get out of his own way in that way. And I think that like it is a very interesting way of doing Norman Osborn where it's like, oh, he is coming at it from a good place where like I need to get back to the city, but like at a certain point, wealth and image consciousness prevent you from doing that in any sort of altruistic way and can actually put you down a pretty dark path.
Yes.
Yeah, I was really taken by a moment that I think was played as funny and was supposed to be funny, but I actually took as a really interesting moment of like, showing who Norman is as a character in this show. Is sort of when he's listing all of the upgrades, like Peter's trying to turn him down, and he's like, "Well, we can do this with the suit, we can do this with the suit, we can do this." He's, "Oh, you know what? I am right. I am always right. This should be." And he's kind of like talking to himself because he just gets so into it. I thought that was really interesting because I was so convinced just based on how Norman Osborn is so often portrayed, and what we know he's going to turn out to be, that like he already does have this like grand evil plan, and he's just like completely like this is all a masquerade, and some of it might be. I mean, like you never know, but that was the moment where it really clicked with me. Where like, oh, this version of Norman really is excited by this. Like he really does find this to be cool and like an interesting opportunity, and he really does want to like do these things with Peter. And I thought that was genuinely really interesting and like a really interesting insight into who this version of the character is, even though it was kind of played as like a joke.
Yeah, and I love that it kind of grows. I love that we get to see like all of these things kind of play out. And to Jake's point earlier, when we talk about kind of having the time to see the characters get fleshed out, I think it's really important, especially when you're establishing. Because by the time we get to the end of episode 5, there are so many threads going on. It's like you kind of think about it, it's like, oh wow, this is going on here. We got Otto Octavius, we got the Scorpion Gang. It's just there's a lot going on in this
It's
show.
like a giant web.
Yes, 110%.
And whose web connects them all?
It's so fun. I have to say I am genuinely surprised by how much I'm enjoying this series. Even something as small as a character moment for Peter with his friend Nico, and just something as simple as he missed hanging out with her at the party because he was doing Spider-Man stuff, and then the whole instance of like she's noticing that he's drifting to these other types of characters, and it's clearly she's doing it. She's talking to him in the sense of, well, you should stay away from these people and stuff like that. But it's also she misses her friend. And I love that at the end of the episode, she is almost like concerned that he's not going to show up again. But Peter, because he's just a good person, he makes it. He finds a way to make it regardless. He remembers and he makes it. But then the Harry thing happens, and then that adds to that tension. So we got a little more tension. I love, man. When we get
And I think the thing that's so good about that relationship is, of course, she doesn't know that the reason why he's doing all these things is because he's Spider-Man. She is taking it as like, you're growing distant because we're growing up, and maybe you don't want to be my friend. Like her anxieties are like normal teenage anxieties, and I think that is the thing I'd always find so interesting about Spider-Man is that the people who are concerned about Peter not being there, not doing this, they don't know that he's not doing it because he's Spider-Man. They think he's just either a bad person or he's forgetful or he's being like all these things that he. So like I think that makes it even more stressful for Peter because Peter wants to be like, no, I have a good reason. I'm not just being a dick. But he really doesn't have much of a choice because he can't admit that he's Spider-Man, and so I like that dynamic a lot.
Yes. I think it's a great way to add to and remind the viewer how difficult this situation is for Peter Parker generally, because he's just the kid managing all of this.
And I think it's interesting too to connect back. I know we already mentioned the parallel between him and Lonnie, but like it's really apparent in these episodes that like, well, Peter's doing that with Nico. It's like, Lonnie's missing football practice because he's also kind of got his own version of that going on, and he also kind of wants to say, well, I had to make this deal to like save my brother, and like I have like a real reason, but like he can't. And I think that's like an interesting bounce back and forth, and like they had some scenes where that was more apparent than in others, but it's been very interesting to see that too.
Hunter, I wanted to get into some of the criminals that we've seen in these 3 episodes because they're all interesting and they're all we got a little bit of the 2-bit criminal thing in episode 3, which was pretty fun. With the type of was it gloves and boots that they had on, that was just that was kind of fascinating to watch. And then we get the Octavius storyline. This is before he becomes Doc Ock. I love the fact that oh, this is even before this character is fully actualized. And then on top of that, you already get the sense, oh, Tony Stark, I don't like him. Bruce Banner, I don't like him either. Norman Osborn, fuck him. I mean, who are these dudes? Like, I'm the dude right here. I'm not getting recognized. So you already see where the personality is gonna come out at some point. What was the most, I would say, or what parts of each criminal interaction, because they all had their fun moments. What were
Yeah.
some things that stood out to you the most?
Well, if we want to go sort of in order,
Sure.
it was interesting to me that so Speed Demon and Tarantula, a lot of them, they don't go by like their supervillain names in the show, but it's who they're based on. I thought it was kind of fun and interesting to pair them as like a Bonnie and Clyde, because those two characters in the comics have absolutely nothing to do with each other. Like Speed Demon is like a version of the Wizard, sorry,
Yeah.
that Grandmaster makes, who like changes his name later, and Tarantula is like a completely different thing. She's one of like 6 Spider-Man villains with that name. It's like a whole thing. But I thought their dynamic as like a Bonnie and Clyde villain duo was kind of fun. And the way they were stylized and the way their tech looked and their dynamic with Spider-Man, I don't know if this was on purpose or not, but it reminded me a lot of the like the 2000s Ultimate Spider-Man comics and like the video game and stuff. They had a lot of villains that had that like spiked hair and like glasses and like a jacket that was kind of colored like their comic suit with like robot boots. And then they were kind of not taken super seriously by Spider-Man. Like usually Shocker would be in a role like that or something. So I thought that was really fun. It's very noticeable that this show has a lot of like super deep cut. Like obviously they have some of the more named villains, but there's a lot of really deep cut villains in this that I find interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That even includes Lonnie's the leader of the 110th gang, Big Don.
Big Don, yeah.
That's really interesting. He is Big Ben Donovan in the comics is like his name. And what struck me when they first introduced him is he's actually been adapted like one other time, and he was actually in the Netflix Daredevil show. But as like a completely reimagined, he's like Fisk's corrupt lawyer, so he actually technically does exist in like the mainline MCU, which I thought was interesting, but just like completely different. And the way he's portrayed in the show is a lot more in line with how we would imagine a traditional Tombstone would be. So I thought that was really interesting because, like, not that maybe that implies he's like
that's a good point. Yeah,
a role model for Lonnie, but like the way he is shown in the show is kind of how we would normally see Tombstone acting, right down to like the way Tombstone kind of historically takes like younger people who feel lost and then like manipulates them into working for him. He famously does that with Robbie Robertson's son.
In the animated
It's like a whole storyline.
Yeah.
So like I thought that was interesting that they take that character and he's kind of how you would traditionally think of Tombstone, and maybe Lonnie's going to be entirely different. The all the characters in the van, I was pumped when they showed up and they were all Russian because I was like, there's a handful of characters these could totally be. 2 of them it's Rhino and Chameleon are Dimitri and Mikhail. Mikhail Sistovich, normally it's Alexei. I think maybe Mikhail's like his middle name in the comics and they just like switched it up, but Dimitri is definitely Chameleon. And that was fun. They had the like, obviously Rhino's Rhino, and then Dimitri's like, I prefer Quiet Way. That's whatever. Unicorn, again, super deep cut. Normally it's a gender bent character. Normally that's an Iron Man villain. And, we see her here as kind of a threat for Spider-Man very briefly. Roxana, I think that might be an original character. I'd love to be, I don't know. I even Googled it because she was the only one I was like, I actually have no idea who she is. And nothing came up. So who's to say? Something that stood out for me, Jake mentioned earlier, giving them moments to breathe. They're like, them as a group in the van while they were trying to escape was hilarious to me. And also I'm not unconvinced that that's like somewhat of an Always Sunny in Philadelphia reference with like the whole wild card and jumping out the back of the van, and like I don't know, their version of Chameleon even kind of looks like Rob McElhenney to me, and I was like, I feel like this can't, I don't know, could be wrong, but that was really funny to me. And I really liked Rhino's. I know he's not Rhino yet, but I'm gonna call him that. His moment with Peter at the end of that last episode is really, really good. Because that is very Rhino to me. I think people think that Rhino's like big dumb idiot all the time, but he does have like one of the things that makes him interesting. He's actually one of my favorite Spider-Man villains, is that he does have sort of like an honor code, and he is kind of like smarter than people give him credit for, at least like emotionally speaking.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was kind of cool to see that come into play. Yeah, and then everything you said with Doc Ock. It's cool to see him look so comic accurate, like
Very,
ridiculously, right down to
very.
the way they like draw the gleam in his glasses. It was
Yeah.
crazy. I almost wish he was German just for fun because I was enjoying the accents. But yeah, it's cool to see. I think something that as much fun as No Way Home was, right? I think we talked about that when that movie came out. Of like, it's cool to see Green Goblin and Doc Ock at this MCU movie,
For sure.
but like, what it didn't do was say like, what does like an MCU, a version of Otto Octavius that was born and raised and exists in this MCU, like what is his goal, what is his what's driving him? And I thought it was cool that even just that one line where he's like, I should be better known than Banner and
Yeah.
Stark. Like that was something we didn't get from that character in No Way Home. So it's kind of cool to see like, what does this Dr. Octopus who has grown up and existed in this world look like? And they kind of put him in like a Tinkerer role. Like the role he's playing in the show is kind of like the way the Tinkerer would normally be used in
Yeah, he's
Spider-Man
he's
comics.
he's behind the fray. He's behind the fray for now, and I guess at some point, he'll get the arms, and
Yeah.
that'll be a lot of fun whenever that happens. Jake, how about you? Like anything, whether it's the villains, whether it's the suits,
I think
whether
the thing for me, I
yeah,
mentioned it last week, that really I like is that because it's a TV show and because it's animated, so you just don't need to do a lot of the same legwork. It just has such a rich tapestry of interconnectedness in like a way that's like not like
mhm,
gratuitous. It's like these characters do on the way each other. Doc Ock is supplying all of these weapons. The Scorpion, like these things always exist in unison with each other. I thought that that's really good, and I think that like they're setting up like that. You get a pretty firm sense of like the of place because obviously it takes place in New York, but it takes place in New York where like mildly superpowered crime is fairly normal. And so like we get that there's an ecosystem going on that Spider-Man's being thrown into, and maybe he doesn't fully understand. I think that that's interesting because most of the stuff we see Spider-Man doing is like regular like saving someone who got their purse stolen, or he's just like interrupting one instance of this organized crime, and clearly he's not aware of how deep it all goes, how all
yeah,
these
it's
things
very
are connected.
reactionary,
And
and
yeah,
that's to be expected.
I think that, and that's exciting because it's like, oh, he doesn't know what he's getting into. He thinks that this is just a one-off person who has a crazy helmet, but no, it's more connected than that.
Yes, the stuff with the tech, which at some point I'm sure Norman will play a big role in. Uh, that moment whenever Peter finds out that Norman's bad is going to be great. I can't wait for that. That's going to be a lot of fun because he's going to feel that betrayal, and then on top of that, the now developing friendship that he has with Harry. Hunter, the way that they present Harry as obviously being the social media influencer, and kind of the way that he talks about his own life and being homeschooled and why people kind of don't get him and stuff like that. And for a different reason, he and Peter bond. What did you make of their relationship?
I think it's a really cool take on the way their relationship has kind of always been portrayed in a certain way. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, and I got excited. I just said classic Spider-Man of how like the way Norman treats Peter in comparison to his own
Yeah.
son is such a vital part of what makes the Peter Harry relationship tick. And it is like it's something that happens in real life to people. It's a very human, like it's a very relatable thing. Um, you know, Harry's thing has always been, and when they were telling stories in the 1960s, it was different because like being an influencer or billionaire's son, whatever, didn't wasn't a thing that back then. But Harry's thing has always been that he is born rich, he has everything, but that's not what he wants. All he wants is companionship. All he wants is a father who loves him. All he wants is to feel like people respect him for him and not for his like status or wealth or anything, which maybe that's why he's an influencer in this show. Maybe he's just desperately trying to find a way to connect to people, which maybe that's why people are being influencers in real life, but we don't have to get into that. But
I
and then
mean,
you have
he mentioned. I think the best part of it is not to cut you. I'll let you go back, but
yeah.
like he mentions getting DMs. He mentions bots. Like that's a really great way to kind of describe what somebody who goes through that kind of goes through on a daily basis, which I think was a nice little great detail.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then on the other end of it, you have Peter, who is just so naturally like making connections with people and
Yeah.
like isn't even really trying to earn, Norman's admiration and is just getting it like at
Yeah.
every corner. And Harry genuinely likes Peter as a person. I mean, they've just met now in the show, but I'm sure we'll see that like develop. And he genuinely loves Peter. But at a certain point, that like jealousy of the way his father treats Peter in comparison to him, and the way that everybody loves Peter, despite the fact that, like, to Jake's point, I mean, again, in this show, he knows that Peter is Spider Man, but, you know, seeing Peter constantly let people down for one reason or another, but everybody still loves him and everybody's still giving him another chance and everyone still praises him. And Harry's like, here I am doing absolutely everything in my power to be the best I can be for everyone, and I'm still not getting that. um it's just it's a absolutely vital part of their relationship, and the reason that it in most versions of their story ultimately, breaks down at a certain point and is usually the thing that kind of leads Harry to like down a darker path. um and I'm really interested to see it play out because we've never really seen it presented this way. But
Yeah.
again, I think it speaks to what I'm so impressed by with the show, is that it keeps really pulling the core of what makes these characters and their relationships tick from like the earliest Spider-Man comics, but it keeps doing it in a way that's incredibly like modern, relatable, and understandable. And I'm thrilled to see where this goes with Peter and
Yeah.
Harry.
Yeah. It's funny to me how you can go from an episode where basically Norman is teaching Peter all these things and he's going through the trials with the suits and everything, and the relationship kind of builds and builds and builds, and then Norman steps back, and then it allows the younger Osborn to step in, and it just creates this kind of different dynamic that you can now see play out over the next 5 episodes, and wonder where does this go. And the more important thing is they both know that he's Spider-Man. So eventually, when or if this turns, that's a really complicated situation for Peter. And I'm just such a fan of this. Is so much care, just something that's simple. And I mentioned it earlier, but the Sokovia Accords thing, the way that they actually brought that in and actually had the conversation about it
Yep.
was in the ways that we would have a conversation about it. And like, oh, like Captain America's on this side, should he help his friend? Should he, should superheroes register? How do you feel about that, Hunter? Do you feel like superheroes should register?
I think
Yeah,
I like about how Peter approaches that though is that he doesn't think it would, like, he doesn't understand that it'll apply to him. Like, he
Yes.
doesn't understand that he's in the like he, and that's so I think essential to the conception. If you're gonna have Spider-Man in a universe like this,
Yeah.
Spider-Man cannot see himself on the same level as the Avengers, even if he is as powerful as them in some ways.
Yeah, well, and this was also a big question when they introduced Spider-Man into the MCU, and like he was introduced in the same movie that the Sokovia Accords were introduced, and
Right.
then in his solo movie, like it's never really addressed in relation to him, and that was a thing that people talked about a lot. So I did find it interesting that this show like immediately addresses that exact question.
Yes, and if you and it views the event, like that's why, when I'm guessing that maybe at some point we might see one of them drop by or something, like just for a nice little cameo. That would
I
be fun.
love that Peter is a Captain America fanboy in this and not an
Mhm.
Iron Man fanboy, and it's no shade. It's not even like MCU shade. That's just
Nah.
I've always loved that Captain America Spider Man relationship in the comics, and it gives me hope that like we might get some of that in this show, and I'm really excited by that.
Even in something like Earth's Mightiest Heroes,
Yep.
where the Skrull situation happens and Cap comes back, and he's kind of the public views him as an outcast and a villain in a way, and then Peter, the way that Peter supports him. I was thinking of that as soon as it was mentioned that Peter was a big Cap fan.
Yep.
But yeah, I love the direction of the show. I'm trying to think. Is there anything else that we are looking at, whether it's not only just going forward, but kind of like presently speaking, in terms of some of the things that we saw? Um, I was I'm very interested to see how they do the reveal of the tech, because they're kind of laying it out. Because what we see in episode 3 is kind of they point to it. Well,
Well,
it seems like you had something, Hunter.
well, I was just gonna say another thing in relation to the tech too is I'm interested to see. I forgot to mention when I was talking about villains because again, there's so many million bajillion characters in this show.
Yeah.
Was the what Matt Gargan, the Scorpions,
Oh yeah, big part
like
of
that
this.
whole
Yeah.
thing. Like we know just from the title sequence alone that he's gonna become like full fledged Scorpion at some point, and right now he's a lot more in line with the Ultimate Comics version where he's kind of like a gang leader. But um, I'm really curious to see like how that plays out with him and how that plays out with Carmilla Black too, who does become the second Scorpion in the comics. There are some deep cut references in this show, man. Like there's a just now that I brought her up as like a side thing, like there's a line where Peter is like, "Are we sure she's not like a cousin of the Hulk or something?" And I thought that was crazy because this isn't even really in the comics. Her mom is the head of AIM, and
Mhm.
it's like hinted at in like one issue of a comic
Yes.
that her dad might be Bruce Banner, and like she interacts with the Hulk a couple times and stuff. But it was just a crazy deep cut reference to me with these characters. It's insane.
Well, that's the funny thing. If you get to a place with this show, and we talked about it last week, but when you don't feel as restricted, and you could play outside the box and really dip into the bag of not only the rogues gallery but just the general characters of the Spider-Man universe,
Yeah,
it's really rich. It's incredibly rich. So it allows everything as a gross. Like I feel like we're halfway and we've already gotten so much and probably still have so much. Like I know Daredevil's supposed to be in the show. We haven't seen him yet. So
yeah.
like just little stuff like that and kind of Peter's story and finding a way to juggle the story has been a lot of fun.
I mean, it feels like we're headed towards some sort of mini like gang war style episode because I'm wondering if that's not where Daredevil comes into play because obviously you have this 1/10 gang, you have the
Yeah.
Scorpions. If Daredevil's going to be around, I mean, do we know is Kingpin in the show? I actually don't
I
know.
have not seen anything on that as of yet.
Okay.
I'll do some digging and see.
But either way, it feels like maybe that's where Daredevil gets involved is when you start having these like street level gangs come together and fighting. And I'm wondering, maybe the Scorpion episode is where that happens. I don't know. But this is obviously building towards some sort of Peter Parker, Lonnie Lincoln, maybe not a standoff, but interaction during like a gang war scenario. And I am excited to
I'm gonna
see
be
how
so
that plays
sad. I'm gonna be
out.
so sad.
Yeah,
I really have. I've gravitated to Lonnie. I empathize with his plight. I understand what he was trying to do, and I just feel bad for him, man, because he's just in such a difficult position. And then you just realize that at some point, when you're in a difficult position and it gets to a point where you've been there for a little bit, you kind of get used to it, and
Yeah.
that's what tends to happen to people like that. And that's just another example of how well that they've illustrated the story to this point. And yeah, it's just been a lot of fun to watch. I'm excited to see where this goes. Um, what is Jake, something that you are now looking forward to as we have all these threads and they're kind of building out? What's something that you're looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to seeing what is like the inadequacy that Peter has that makes Norman take things into his own hands, right?
Mm,
It's clearly there is friction between what Peter wants to be as Spider-Man and what Norman wants out of a hero, and that friction is, I think, where Norman decides that he needs to take, be
hmm
his own hero. And so I'm excited to see where that comes up because instead of it just like being a general like I want to become more powerful, clearly he is trying to do this in a normal good way, but he can't. And so something's going to happen to make him become the Green Goblin,
Yeah.
Or
or
hear me out on this one.
Yeah. Go ahead.
What if it's not even Norman? I mean, again, I don't know. We don't know exactly. It seems like he's not the biggest fan of his own son, but like, I could also see a world where they maybe skip the Norman thing initially and have him be like, well, if Peter's not going to be this like new generation of hero, then I guess it's going to have to be my son. And then he makes like some sort of thing for Harry, and then Harry does it because, of course, he wants to impress his father. And then something along those lines too would be interesting.
Well, that's a that would be if they decided to go that route. That would be interesting, just based off of the fact that Harry is like this really, really popular individual.
Yeah.
So him trying to manage a dual identity would be kind of wild, and it would be such a parallel to what Peter has to go through because he's just Peter Parker,
Yeah.
just a kid with glasses. Um, Hunter, what is something that you're looking forward to with this series, and how these plot lines all advance?
Um, I'm curious to see how I mean, I know we still have like a couple more batches of episodes, and like I said, I'm really looking forward to that Peter Parker Lonnie Lincoln interaction. However that plans out, I think that's maybe my biggest thing. But I'm also just kind of curious what like the end game for this season is when we know there's going to be at least another one, if not two
Yes,
more. Um, because it's clearly pretty well planned out, and like I just we're halfway through, and there's like we said, so many different plot lines being juggled right now, and I'm curious which ones are like the end game for season one and which ones are seeds for season two, and I'm gonna be really curious to see like maybe Doc Ock the never becomes Doc Ock this season. Like maybe that's like the
I was
cliffhanger
just
ending
thinking
is
of
that
that.
like
Yeah.
this is leading towards gang wars, and then that sets up Doc Ock to be like season two main villain or something. I don't know. I'm curious to see which of those develop immediately and which are more of a long game.
I'll say for myself, Peter's relationships with the people around him, his friends, his aunt, I think all of those things are going to be something to watch just based off of the fact that this is going to get more intense for him and more of the hiding the secret itself. It should be something interesting. And then of course how he manages whatever comes of his situation with Norman. I think Jake's point is really astute in terms of, oh shoot, like this guy really wants to take over. He really wants to kind of do this situation this way, and I don't know how Peter's going to handle that situation when it occurs. So that's one thing on that end. Seeing more of these rogues gallery of villains. I think Hunter, when you talk about the gang wars thing, it's kind of you spoke to me, and it's kind of a summation of all of our conversations over the past few years about what an MCU Spider-Man should look like and
Yeah,
how they
totally.
should do these stories, and how street level is the holy grail and everything that you could ever want. And maybe this is the purpose of this show, is to just give us that.
I think
When
it is. Yeah.
Because I think, yeah, with the film version, it's pretty clear that the character is so huge and so popular in so many ways that you can't help but pull him into the orbit of the Avengers and
Yeah.
bigger stories and stuff like that. So there's always going to be that difficult side of it when it comes to how it looks. But
Yeah.
this show kind of fits. It hits all the sweet spots of the stuff that comic book fans will want, and I think general audiences are pretty positive on this show. So I think it's something that's hitting the touchstones for everybody.
I agree, and I've been thinking it since like the very first episode, but I've been really hesitant to phrase it in like this is what MCU Spider-Man should be, because I don't want that to play into a certain like toxic kind of conversation that's been happening for years online. And I don't want it to imply that like I dislike Tom Holland Spider-Man or that I like despise the MCU Spider-Man movies. I think they're great in their own way. But yeah, I think that this is very much again, the show was originally supposed to be MCU Spider-Man, like just what we don't see in the movies. But it is very clear that Jeff Trammell maybe went in there and was like, if we just make this an alternate reality thing, then we can just give all the things people have been saying that they want to see this version of Spider-Man do. We can show them what that would look like with this show. It fully feels like it, and it's so fun. Like having I think that was really apparent in the Norman conversation with Peter when
Yeah.
he's talking about the like you know the Avengers are going to figure out like they're going to have to be held accountable by these Sokovia Accords. Like they're going to have to figure out this like gigantic big world stuff. That's not for you. Like you have your own corner of the universe. You do your thing. I'll help you with that. Let them be them. And it was very much like you're not in the Avengers in this storyline. Like they're going to do their own thing. You can talk about it with your friends, but like you're going to come in and handle the gang wars. Like that's what you're going to do. We're going to drop a reference to like the tracksuit mafia, and like that might be more relevant to you than whatever's going on with like Thanos, you know?
Yeah,
And I think
which yeah,
that's very interesting to me.
which is how it was in the books a lot
That's
of
what it
times. Like I
was.
remember the Fantastic Four, and he'd hang out with them for a little bit. The Avengers, and he'd be like, I don't really, I think I'm cool over here, and that's kind of the spot that he fills in, and that's really kind of like a perfect way to present this version of Spider-Man. And again, I can't say enough. A couple of weeks ago, I was like, I don't know about this show, but I am completely glad to be wrong.
Yeah.
Like it's
It's
engaging.
yeah. It's just it's I think about it is it's a lot of the stuff is just elemental storytelling, which the MCU can
Yeah,
sometimes screw up. I think it's like the stuff. It's like the stuff we're talking about. We're talking about like these relationships, and Hunter, you brought it up with the Norman, Peter, and Harry stuff. It's like just the comical relationships are all the fundamental relationships we have as people, just with superheroes involved. And I think that you can get away from that when you're telling stories that are $200 million. When you're doing a show like this, you can really dial in on it.
Yeah,
yeah,
and there's a lot of stuff that I was nervous about. I mentioned last week I was interested to see what they would do when we knew he was going to wear so many suits in this show. And I was like, Identity Crisis is like a really crazy comic book story arc. And I was like, if they're going to try to fit like Identity Crisis into a random like sixth episode of the show or something, that's going to like, I'm terrified of what that would be. And it was cool to have them kind of just be like, no, we're just gonna have a really cool like Identity Crisis Easter egg and reference, and have him have all of those comic book suits from that really weird Clone Wars like follow up arc in the '90s, and
yeah.
have that just be like a fun reference while he's trying to find his identity in this show. And like it happens so organically, and I was like, well, if they can figure that out and make that just kind of like a fun organic episode in this series, then I have a lot of faith.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I feel like it's yeah. You look forward to what comes next with this, and yeah, we're gonna see what happens. Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man is a fascinating show, and it's been fun to talk about it here. Looking forward to doing that next week. Oh, before we go, I actually had a question. I was thinking about this guys, and I'll ask each of you this. The Captain America movie, Brave New World, comes out next week.
Does it?
It sure it shit sure does. This train ain't
Can I say
stopping.
this? Can I just say a quick thing? Harrison
No,
Ford,
please.
honestly, incredible press tour.
Yeah.
He's the people he like heard the grumpy reputation, and you know what he said? He's like, no, I just fucking hate talking to Star Wars fans. I'm a very nice guy. That's really what it feels like, right? Like,
Which is
Yeah.
kind of what he said about joining the MCU. Is like, wait, these guys are having seem like
no,
they're having a lot of fun.
I mean, I don't want to. I do this. I know I like say like I've previously said, but how many times have I said that the superpower the MCU has is that there's not that much drama and people seem to like doing it. And the reason Harrison Ford joined the MCU is because like he saw and heard people enjoy doing it. Like, but anyway, I will say a thing you pointed out, which I loved, is the way that he put over Anthony Mackie. I thought that was
Yes.
really nice and really essential. Sorry, keep going.
Yes. All right. So, like, the question I wanted to ask you guys was simply: so as we're now a week away from everybody going to see this, there's been a lot of just general discussion about how this movie might look or how it might be. Hunter, you've even told me some things off the record about it that were interesting, and there's stuff that I've heard about it off the record that has also kind of been presented a certain way. So as you go into this movie, Hunter, I'll start with you. What is your general feeling as we get ready to see this movie and what it might do to the fandom who's already like attacking a scene that they posted online yesterday?
Um, well, honestly, I haven't even seen that scene that they posted online yesterday, which is good. I don't normally watch the like scenes they post early because I'd rather just go into the movie and like
Oh,
see it.
I actually try to avoid it this time, but then it just came up, and then everybody started talking about it. So that's why I referred to it this time. And it doesn't matter if you haven't seen it, but I think it's just the point that people are ready to pounce on this movie already.
I think
Largely.
people want to hate this movie. People
Yes.
want it to be. I think there are a lot of different people that want it to be bad for a lot of different reasons. But I think that, um, you know, it doesn't help how publicized it was that it went through like a million reshoots or whatever. And
Mhm.
I think that, yeah, granted, it seems this movie went through more reshoots than the average, big budget movie. It's been said before though that like reshoots are a very normal thing, and I think that people just heard a lot about it and they're just waiting. Like people have for years have just been waiting on the downfall of the MCU, and I think that
That's a part of it, yeah,
yeah,
to a
and I
degree.
think that there are, and that's not the only reason. Like, there's a lot,
Oh
like
yeah,
I
yeah,
said, a lot of different
absolutely.
people want to hate it for a lot of different reasons. But I think that there's a lot of people who are like, if this one sucks, then like it's more ammo to be like, it's over. Like, do whatever. I don't know. I want it to be good. Like, I'm never going into a movie being like, I hope this is sucks and it's a
Hmm.
terrible time.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm
I
trying to think if I've ever. I'm trying to think if I've ever thought that. Like,
yeah.
no, not even like Madam
Uh,
Web and Morbius. I wanted to be good. Like,
Like I would like for it to be good.
yeah,
yeah.
I like the cast. Like I like the general
Hmm.
ideas that I've heard like being played around in the movie. Like I think it has a lot of promise, and I think it has the potential to surprise us. But I think unfortunately what this movie might have to deal with is because of all of the like pre-online speculation and hate or whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
This movie, I don't know if it can get away with being all right. Like it,
yeah,
I think that if it's anything other than actually really really good, people are just gonna like be like that sucked and like want to tear it to shreds. So, but I maybe I'm a hopeful romantic when it comes to movies and comic book movies in
Hmm.
particular. But like and it's coming out on Valentine's Day, so who knows? But I really do think it could be surprisingly good. Like I don't think it's a guarantee that it's gonna suck. And I think that I think there's at least gonna be a handful of really good moments, or at least I
yeah,
hope so. But
yeah.
I mean I'm nervous, but I you
No,
know, fingers
fingers
crossed.
crossed. Yes, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I
But
have I
yeah,
have
go ahead,
middling
Jake.
expectations. I don't. I want it to just be like enjoyable and like in. I just don't want it to feel incompetent. And I think the big thing about like the reshoots or whatever is that like the reality is only like 5% of people who go buy a ticket know anything about the reshoots. And I think that that's but and so people hear that and be like, oh, that doesn't matter. It's like no. I think the thing about movies these days is that when there's like bad buzz about something that happened on the set or whatever, normal people don't need to know what happened, but the tastemakers, the people who talk about this stuff, there's a stink to it. And so even if you're someone who doesn't know anything about all the reshoots, you know that people who are like movie people are not talking about this movie in a positive way. That it has the vibe of like, this is like I think that that's part of what happened in the Marvels. It had the vibe of like, I don't know about this one, guys.
Yeah.
And I think that I think they're gonna be. I think there's a pretty immediately probably gonna be people who are like, come on, it's not that bad, just because I think the expectations are really low. And I think that like what it's going for doesn't seem like it's like it seems like uh, in my mind it feels like the movie should have a pretty high floor because it doesn't seem like it's doing anything
Yes.
crazy ambitious. Um, but I also think a lot of the general vibe about it is just like I really just think that audiences that to use the term I just used before this movie they did not do enough to put Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson over. I think that there's a lot of people just like this is not what are we doing? This is not a Captain America movie, and I think that that's unfair to him. But I think that that is a lot of what what's going on.
There is there has always been my feeling on this, and that last point that you just made, Jake, has kind of been my feeling on this all along. I think that they 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 had moments in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I feel like it had moments, and this was a discussion the other day, like oh whether Falcon and the Soldier. I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier had moments where yes, it was good, but then it just did the thing at the end, which undercut almost everything that it was trying to say at the outset of it. Which that's the thing that always will bother me about that show, to a degree. And I just think it's really hard when you don't go out of your way. And this is not just a Anthony Mackie Captain America. This is all the new characters. When you don't go out of your way to really really try and put them over, with I would say the exception of Miss Marvel and yeah, Miss Marvel basically. And I mean, I love the Agatha show, but that's a different type of character that doesn't belong with the mains. Like we're talking about the main heroes. Presentation matters. Hashtag everything is wrestling. Putting your people over matters, and I don't think that has been accomplished. So therefore, people are you gonna get your teachers of the world who gonna say what they're gonna say about a Mackie Captain America led movie. So that's always gonna be there. I am I am optimistic myself that I think the point that both of you made is kind of where I am in terms of like I feel like because I've heard so much about it, I probably feel like when I watch it, I'm not gonna feel bad.
I just need
I'm
to
not
see the
gonna be
movie
like,
already. It's been
yeah,
too
I'm
long.
ready. It's been, and that's the other part. It's been too long. This movie was supposed to come out last year. So when we talk about like the Falcon and the Winter Soldier was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
That's the other part of all this. And granted, things happen, you understand it and stuff like that. But when you're not in the lexicon, when you're not in the presence of the people watching, it becomes very difficult to have that staying power, especially with people's attention spans nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see what happens. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that. It's
I just want to
fascinating.
know.
Yeah,
I
what's
just
up?
want to know what they're gonna do with the leader because he's like not been in the marketing at all,
Mm-hmm.
and they've been really pushing Red Hulk, who in reality is probably gonna be in like one scene.
Pretty much.
And I personally have been waiting to see uh I'm blanking on the actor's name.
Tim Blake
I'm so
Nelson, the GOAT, the God.
thank you so much. That's why I was so impressed. I'm like, he is the GOAT, and that's why I'm so
He's
upset.
always good in everything.
He's always good in everything. And I'm like, he's actually a really great casting choice for the leader. And I'm like,
Yeah, Giancarlo Esposito, Sidewinder, like
Mhm.
yo, like we got some real heavy hit. Harrison Ford, we got some heavy hitters.
Yeah,
in
right.
this movie.
Harrison Ford's in an MCU movie. Eat your heart out.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'm that in that from that aspect, I'm looking forward to seeing some good performances. That's what whether they're individual or collective, we'll have to find out. But I'm happy that I was able to get your thoughts on that. And programming note for our listeners and viewers. So we're gonna do the Captain America pod the following Monday after the movie comes out, and we will be back next week to continue our Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man coverage. Want to thank Hunter for joining us as he always does. Appreciate you, sir. Do you have anything to tell us?
I do. Oh man, last time I was on, I mentioned that I was really close to being able to talk about a cool thing that I've been wanting to talk about for months. And literally yesterday, I finally officially got the green light. Um, so I work as you can see on the hat. I work for a local New York City brewery called KCBC. We're based out of Brooklyn, and we have been working with Marvel and Disney for a little bit now, and we are officially making the official beer for Daredevil Born Again, which is really cool.
Salute.
Thank you all. And with that, we've gotten permission from Disney to we're making this beer. It's going to be a 6.7% IPA. It's going to be called Devil You Know. We dropped the it's cleaner.
Mhm.
The can art, I have concept of it. We don't have final can art yet, so I don't want to share anything just because it's not done. But that should be soon, and I'll post about it on my socials, and we'll post about it on the KCBC Beer socials. So please follow that. And then what I'm ultimately getting at too is when the beer launches, which will be right around the time that the first episodes of Daredevil Born Again drop, or episode. I guess we don't really know the release cadence yet. We're also going to do this big fun event in our tap room. So hopefully we'll have the beer will be there. We're going to try to make some Daredevil themed cocktails. We also have non-alcoholic drinks if anyone doesn't drink and still wants to come hang out. We're hoping to get some cool Daredevil goodies to give people, maybe play some Daredevil trivia, and do a premiere party with the episodes and whatnot. So that'll be fun. Follow KCBC Beer, or follow me, HRADESI 14 on Instagram, and we'll post about it. But look out for Devil You Know, limited special official Daredevil beer. It's cool.
Hell yeah.
That's wonderful, and we'll be happy to support. And I'm gonna make sure you're gonna get me to drag my old ass outside to come to the
art.
tab. I'm gonna come through.
The can's gonna be really cool too. It's been fun getting to check out this creative process. I've never been part of something you'll be in a grocery store and be like, oh, there's a Game of Thrones beer.
Yeah.
That's cool. I wonder how that happened. It's been very interesting to be on the creative end of it and actually see how something like that happens.
And I'll say I think it's cool of Disney to do it. Not that you're at a mini tiny brewery, but I would, if you told me who's gonna make the official beer of Daredevil. No, if you were asking me who is gonna make the official beer of Daredevil, I'd be like, well, surely one of the big companies. But no, they're giving it to you guys, and you have a really cool. If you've never been to the KCBC, it's really cool. When they do the event, a little extra incentive, I will be there as well. So I mean, it's easier. I'm outside all the time. AC is he's dragging his
I mean,
Yeah.
to Jake's point, we are like it's an entirely local. It is a there's like 30 of us who work there total. So again, it's really thrilling that they came to us with this proposal. And even the can art's gonna be really cool. Even our artist, his name's Earl Holloway. Funny Bones on Instagram. He's lives in Brooklyn and he's a local artist and he's like taking a stab at a couple indie comics and he does all of our can art. All of our can art's kind of comic book themed. So it's he's kind of living his own dream too because he gets to draw like a Daredevil comic book cover and slap it on a beer can, which is really
That's
cool.
neat,
So
man.
he's been really pumped about that too. It's
Awesome.
really fun. It's been really really fun to be like a part of this. It's really cool.
Yeah, man. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'm looking forward to partaking in them drinks. So,
Yes.
that should be a lot of fun.
Mhm.
With that being said, Jay Christie, where can we follow you, sir?
You can follow me at the J Christie on Twitter at J Christie on Blue Sky. I'm doing a 18-hour fundraiser for the Trevor Project live stream on the 22nd. Please donate to it now. I'm doing giveaways on Twitter as the week goes on. One of the main things I'm doing is I'm getting people who have done episodes of the Museum of Twitter to sign copies of their tweets and send it out. So I got Mariano to sign a copy of the Risk It All tweet. Well, he's going to when I send it to him. I have
Yes.
the great weird Twitter user Bucky Isotope is going to sign a copy of his Down with the Sickness tweet, and I have a couple others. I have two more that are locked down that I'm going to be announcing soon of people who are signing copies of the tweets and sending it to people. So I'm gonna keep trying to do more of that. I'm hoping to get some more signing stuff. And then during the stream we'll be giving away some stuff too. So please donate if you can. And donate early because that enters you into all these raffles. So because I want to try to get people to get their money. Because what I found is, and this is not any problem, but people are forgetful and complacent. So you need to keep giving them new incentives to do stuff. I've learned that over my time doing these. That you have to keep reminding people.
Yes, keep hammering that point home. Appreciate you, Jake. You can follow me on Twitter at AnthonyCanton_3. Follow me on Blue Sky at AnthonyCanton3. Follow the show on all platforms at MC University Pod. I've noticed that there's a nice little uptick of YouTube subscribers. I think we are up to 319 right now. So, with that being said, like I was saying with the contest, when we get to 350, we'll give away 2 Wash the Gender shirts, and then when we get to 400, if time aligns, if we get to 400, Lord willing, maybe we'll do the Thunderbolts free ticket for y'all if you are so inclined to subscribe and keep them numbers going up. But appreciate everybody for listening, supporting the Patreon, all of those things. For Hunter Radesi and Jake Christie, I'm Anthony Canton III. This has been Marvel Cinematic University, and we will talk to you next time.